In this episode, I review Lenny from 1974. This was directed by Bob Fosse. It was written by Julian Barry, and it starred Dustin Hoffman and Valerie Perrine. I also spoke to the editor of this film, Alan Heim, about his experience working on the film. So here's what Alan has to say about editing Lenny. This is a film I've always really loved. It had a real. It's so powerful. I mean, all the films you did with Fosse, the three films, are so emotionally powerful. And the story that you told about how Fosse wanted Hoffman, he felt that Hoffman lacked the edge of Lenny Bruce, and so this is how you came up with the idea of during the scenes then cutting to the stand up routines and breaking it up that way. What is there? Do you know why he couldn't get that out of him on the set? Why he just sort of printed and move on, or were they just butting heads way too much?
There was a lot of tension. Dustin had done a couple of movies. He hadn't done a lot of movies. And Bob had won the Triple Crown that year. He had won the Oscar for Cabaret, an Emmy for Liza with a Z, which I edited.
Right.
And uh, what was the third award? Oh, and the Tony.
The Tony.
Yeah,
Right. Was that
for
Chicago? Must have
uh,
been Chicago.
Pippin. No, it was for Pippin.
Oh, okay. Right.
Yeah,
Yeah, I
which
think Chicago was a little later.
which the very acerbic critic John Simon described Pippin as a triumph of a man over material. And the man was Fosse and the material was the book. We were doing Lenny at the time. There was always an interesting overlap because we were doing Lenny and he would go from my cutting room to rehearsals for Pippin. And he'd come back
Oh
holding
my
his
God. Yeah.
and he really it's an incredible triumph. It really is because it's not much of a book. It's still playing. I mean, it's still used in schools and then revivals occur and
Right. Right.
but it was brilliant and the cast was brilliant. So okay, I digressed again. Back to my get me back.
That's okay. Just discussing his relationship with Dustin. So
Yeah.
do you know why he couldn't get that out of him on the set? That
Well,
more edgy performance?
many directors don't want to let actors see their dailies uh, for many reasons. One of which is that actors will subtly change their performance after seeing day one. They might change it for chain two, and you might not want that as a director, and you certainly don't want it as an editor. You don't want to have two different people that you're trying to put together. So I do know this. So Fosse won the three major awards that year.
Right.
The studio said, "Okay, what do you want to do next?" And Fosse said, "I want to do Lenny," which was a Broadway play at the time, written by Julian Barry. And the budget was minuscule, probably $2 million. And Dustin probably got $1 million of
Oh
that.
wow. God.
So Fosse shot it in black and white, I think, for it to be newsreely, kind of.
Yeah.
I also maybe, and I don't know, but it might have been done also because it was cheaper. It's
Oh,
possible. I don't know.
okay.
But there was a constant budget crunch, and Dustin likes to do many takes, many
Right.
takes,
Right.
which is another story I can tell you about a different movie. But there was no time, and Bob really wanted to just keep everything moving. And the producer, who I knew for a long time, really, he was on the set, the line producer, and he was making Fosse cut script, and Fosse hated cutting script. And I was editing in a hotel in Florida, which is where we were shooting. At that time, you could have many empty nightclubs in one hotel and many empty nightclubs all over Miami. So Dustin would occasionally corner me in the hallway and say, can I see my dailies? Can I see my dailies? I said, no, no, I'm sorry, you can't see your dailies. He would get angry and hostile, but actors want to be liked.
Right.
And um, Lenny, Fosse and I discussed this. Lenny Bruce probably didn't give a shit whether you liked him or not. He was up there on stage to do what he did. And Dustin always seemed to be wanting the audience's love in the room. It was all done in front of people. And it softened the performance. So when Bob said that to me, I thought it was going well, except when he said, he's just too soft. I came up with this idea of interspersing. The script, by the way, was incredibly complex. It interspersed the past and the present. You talked about it earlier, messing around with time. And
so that was already in the script.
That was in the script.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I never saw the show, so I don't know what that was like. I know
Bob. The play was I've read the play. It's very, very different.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm not surprised.
Mm-hmm.
Julian Barry, who was a friend of Lenny's, when he wrote the script, he wrote a film script originally, and he went to Peter Guber, I believe, and said, I want to do a film about Lenny Bruce before he wrote the script. And he got the go ahead to do it. So he wrote the script, and he came back to the studio within the studio, said, this is filled with dirty language. We can't do this. He said, it's a film about Lenny Bruce. What? So the film script became the play. And then it became film again.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah. So Julian, we taught a class together, one class. We lectured for somebody at USC. And Julian's memory of the script, that it was very complex, was quite accurate. But my memory is that we made it much more layered, much more complex, because I discovered, and I had a sense that if I got out of Lenny real fast doing one of his routines and went to the real life incident that triggered it, it would make it edgier.
It really works too.
Because if you don't linger,
yeah,
enough time to think. Yeah. Right. So Bob said, try it. And he left, and I put together the first two scenes of Dustin doing his stand-up and having a fight with Honey at some point. I think, I don't remember the actual order, but I did those early scenes, that early scene. Fosse came back, showed it to him. He said, great, let's do it all the way through. And that's when I became an editor. That's when I realized the power of what I did. And so, yeah, that was always a struggle. Dustin absolutely hated the way the film was treated, his performance. Though he got an Academy Award nomination, I believe.
Yes. Yeah.
And he just hated that idea. But we did give him that 6-minute scene in the middle where we don't cut at all, the Chicago nightclub.
Oh, when he goes on high?
Goes on really high. Yeah.
The medium. Yeah. Sorry, not medium. It's all done in a master.
Yeah. And the reason, there were two reasons, which become very technical. But what we were shooting in, as I said, real nightclubs, and there was air conditioning inside. And outside, where you took the film to put it into changing bags and things like that, the film picked up static electricity between the warm, humid air outside and the cold air inside. So we got a call from the lab before I ever saw the dailies. They said, you've got a lot of flashes of static electricity on the film. Okay, what do you do? So I told everybody on the set, and that night we saw the dailies, and it was pretty appalling. I tried to treat the material the same way we had treated all the other material. That is, quick cutting and moving around, and just couldn't make it work. I mean, the flashes were so bad. Where he gave a good performance, there would be a flash. And when he was not good, there would be a flash. So I put it together with second-rate material, and we looked at it and said, no, it's not working. What are we going to do here? We need this scene. And we said, he deserves to be on the stage. I mean, Fosse actually said that to me. Let's give him his 6 minutes. Let's not cut. We had no choice, but
So that's why the whole thing's a master. That's interesting.
and it
Oh
was
wow.
brilliant because it makes him seem.
Yeah.
I always felt he was a little bit like it's almost an operating room, and all the students were around, and he was a subject. Really
Yes.
like a pinned bug. He was there. There was no place to go. No
That's such
place.
a great scene. I really love that scene.
Yeah, me too.
It's a
Also,
shame.
not much cutting.
What was that? Sorry.
Not much cutting. I mean, I always like it when I didn't have to cut a lot.
Yeah. Right.
Except, if I could, I think there's not an editor in the world who would say, I have to cut this.
Right.
If you had the performance
Yes.
to
Yeah.
go through a whole thing. Yeah.
Well, it's a shame. It's a shame he didn't like how it turned
Yeah.
out, because it's such a great film, and he's so great in it. I mean, it's one of my favorite performances of his, and I thought that really worked by cutting into the comic routines, because for example, the one of the early times you did it is after the car accident with his wife, and then he says he sleeps with the nurse when his wife's in the hospital, and then you cut to him making jokes, not necessarily directly about that incident, but about guys cheating on their wives, and it makes him look worse. Like it worked really, really well.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to say at this remove what was in the script and what wasn't in the script, particular transitions. But basically, the structure of that film was made in the cutting room, remade in the cutting room. It was a great script. When I read the script, it was delivered to me in the evening, and after my wife she was having a bad cold or flu. She had gone to sleep early, and I ran in at about 11 o'clock at night. I ran in with the script, and I said, "You got to read this." And she said, "Tomorrow." And I said, "Really, great script." And then it got better.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. And you had said that even at the end, there was a whole, after he is sentenced to prison, and there was supposed to be a whole other 20 minutes. And then you just went right from him being taken out of the courtroom to his corpse. And I love the cut, because the lawyers close the briefcase, and right then it goes boom to his corpse. Was that because, as you had said, well, at that moment he's dead. So what was that footage like? Was it meant to sympathize with him more, or?
Yeah, you actually see the footage. There are fragments of it. No, now I'm trying to remember if it's after he dies or in the courtroom. I really don't remember. But there was a scene of him wandering around the empty swimming pool.
Yes.
There's a fragment of it in the movie. There's a scene where he says goodbye to his daughter that had much more stuff in it.
Yeah.
What happened there, about 8 o'clock at night, we had to show the film to David Picker, who was the producer of it. And we had to show it the next day. We had been stalling David for a while. He had been very patient. And he was a gentle, wonderful guy, and a great producer, because he left you alone. But we really had to show it to him. And so Bob took all of us out to dinner, my crew at the time, maybe 4 or 5 people. And we all went to the Palm, and we had a nice big dinner at 8 o'clock at night, nice steak dinner. And we came back 8:30, 9 o'clock to the cutting room, figuring we're going to work all night, which has never been my method.
Right.
And in the elevator, I said to Bob, "Why don't we just kill the son of a bitch?" And Bob said, "What do you mean?" I said, after he's dragged out of the courtroom, his life is over. That's it.
Yeah.
And we went back to the cutting room. I would say we weren't there more than 20 minutes. I took out a bunch of crap. That's what happened. It was after the courtroom, there was a whole bunch of stuff of his decline. The swimming pool empty, eating peanut butter out of a jar with spoon, getting fat.
Right.
All of that was at 20 minutes or so of Nothing. It really was not, it didn't tell you anything about this guy. So I whipped all of that out. Basically, I took out two reels, just bonk, put the
Yeah.
two pieces together, and there it was. Then
Yeah.
after we showed it to David Bicker, we went back and we carefully put in a couple of minutes that we felt were needed to show his decline, to show that he was a human being, apart from everything.
Right. And where, and that's, to me, that sounds like such a great idea. Do you just kind of go with your gut on where when you come up with ideas, or
Yeah,
do,
usually you become script bound, but
right?
also you'll do things like, well, okay, this isn't working. Why don't we put the end of the movie at the beginning? That's an easy
Yeah.
one.
Right.
It's a
Right.
whole story of flashback. Why don't we do this? Why don't we do that? It's yeah, I go by my gut. Craig McKay, who became a truly great editor, always says that in interviews. You go by your gut. Um, Gut is not a word I use a lot, but yeah, it's you go on your feelings, and
Hmm.
so that's kind of important.
Oh no, absolutely. Well, it worked. It worked so wonderfully that the most I think Dustin's have said about it was just telling us a couple of stories about researching
Oh,
researching Lenny. Just have some interviews I've seen with him, but he hasn't said much. I believe Alec Baldwin interviewed him about it, so I'd have to
ah,
find it. I'd have
oh,
to
I
find
see.
it. He just said it was hard to work with Fosse. That's all I saw from it.
Yeah,
I'd have to find it.
yeah. Well, yeah. He was young. He was really young, and he was full of beans.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's an expression you won't hear a lot.
Thank you again to Alan for sharing his experiences working on this fantastic film. This is a film I've loved for since I've seen it. I saw it in early 2006. I was actually in acting school at that time, and there's a really popular used record and DVD store. See, they sell all kinds of used CDs and stuff like that, which still exists. We do still have some stores that sell DVDs and Blu-rays, and CDs and vinyl and stuff like that. And I saw it there, and I hadn't heard of it before. I was getting interested in Dustin Hoffman, for sure, and it just looked really appealing. So I bought it, and I was blown away. And to this day, it's still one of my favorite Dustin Hoffman performances, if not the best film he was in my view. And the irony is that he actually, as Alan said, didn't like the film for all the reasons that Alan described. For those of you who have not seen this film, this is of course a true story of the comedian Lenny Bruce, who committed suicide in the 1960s. The story of 1960s comic Lenny Bruce, whose groundbreaking, no holds barred style and social commentary was often deemed by the establishment as too obscene for the public. That is a plot according to IMDb. One thing Alan pointed out, which I really hadn't thought of before, is that the films of Bob Fosse, I've only actually seen Cabaret once, so I won't. I mean, that is also about show business, and his first feature, Sweet Charity. They all revolve around characters in show business. And since I know the ones that Alan edited best, Lenny, All That Jazz, and Star 80, not only are they in show business, but they also are destroyed as a result of being in show business. Not necessarily because show business did it to them. I don't want to just say that it's a cut and dry situation, but that is partly the truth with all of these characters, and they couldn't exist outside of their art form, in All That Jazz, in Star 80. Well, I mean that one. I don't know if you'd call them. I don't know if you'd call that his art form, but the main character, played by Eric Roberts, has a deep need to be in show business at all costs. And Lenny is no different. It's he's a comedian, and the film is about how he was destroyed by the establishment because they felt that his language was obscene, and that he couldn't say certain things in public. And the irony is a country that prides himself on free speech. And he and Lenny would often point out that we are all a hypocrisy at every step of our lives, and that's why his comedy was so brilliant. But that really is what the film is about this man whose art form was taken away from him, his words were taken away from him, and to the point where he couldn't earn a living. And so this is who he was. This is what, it's not a matter of, well, okay, I'll go do something else. um, he was a man who this was his calling, and it was taken away from him, and it destroyed him, and he ultimately died in the end. So it's a tragic film. But what I like so much about the film is that it's got a beautiful structure that we discussed, of cutting back and forth in time, cutting to his comedy acts in the middle of different scenes, and the comedy acts often relate to what is going on in the scenes that me and Alan talked about. When we first see him, he's a young man, and he's actually not a very good stand-up. He's trying to find his voice. He does imitations. He's not, people don't really like him. And then he meets Kitty, played by Valerie Perrine. She's phenomenal in it. And once he meets her, she's a woman who's works in the nightclubs, and she's a stripper and a dancer. And so they start to work together, and his act begins to evolve from there. And this is when he begins to speak his mind. And at first, people are telling him not to. People will say you'll never work again. And he didn't care. He stuck to his guns, and he felt that he had something that was that needed to be said. And he was really finding his voice. And so whether he cared, whether he was gonna be successful at it or not, I don't know. The relationship between Lenny and Kitty is really interesting to me, because one thing that Alan pointed out was something in common with these films outside of the showbiz element is that the leading men all manipulate women to an extent. And Lenny is no different, and he has these insecurities. We see in the hospital that he sleeps with the nurse, and then he lies about it. As soon as they leave the hospital, they shake the nurse's hand, and the nurse can just tell by the energy between them and the that something happened. And she said she said something along the lines of, "You mated with her, didn't you? Or you were with her." And you don't hear what Lenny says. You could tell in his behavior that he's trying to talk her out of it. But then they cut to Alan and Bob Fosse. They cut to the stand-up at this point of Lenny saying, deny it, don't ever tell the truth. And everyone's laughing, right? So it gave him that extra edge of him manipulating his way out of these situations, even though Kitty knows that he's not telling the truth. Immediately after that, he comes with this Cadillac, and then the story goes from there. But as she says, he had a need to prove himself. And this a scene later was interesting, was that once they start to take drugs, and he's talking Kitty into a threesome with another woman, and she's saying no, and he's pushing her into it. And it's actually done really interesting, because he's not forceful. He's like whispering it to her. She's saying no, and he's just gently nudging her to do it. And so she does do it. And then afterwards, you see after it's over, the sex scene with this woman, the three of them, it actually is cutting to Dustin's eyes, and you get the impression like it's an awkward scene, because it's not sexy. It's not really sexy, because it has this awkwardness, and you can tell that Dustin is not liking what he's seeing, even though Dustin, as Lenny, is the one who talked her into it. But it immediately cuts to Kitty crying, and Lenny saying, "Oh, I didn't think you would enjoy it that much." So it's almost like he was testing her to see if she would do it. He's trying to control her, to see what he can get out of her, and as she says, to play these games. So like, what was he up to there? Is he seeing if she's a lesbian? Or is he seeing what she'll do for him on a sexual level to have a threesome? Did he want to have a threesome, but then later on felt he had mixed feelings because, as he put it, she enjoyed it too much. And you don't really know. It's sort of open to interpretation why he did that, if he clearly didn't want her to enjoy it, or as he put it, enjoy it that much. But he's testing her, he's manipulating her, he's controlling her, and it's obviously having a deep effect on her. And as she says, I love you, Lenny, so did she do it to please him? Did she do it out of her own insecurities? Was she bisexual? Was she gay? We don't know. And the story, quickly moves forward as her drug addiction increases. They get married. They have a child. One thing I forgot to mention to Alan is there's a beautiful edit that happens in this Chinese restaurant where Lenny is there with his child and he's waiting for Kitty, and she comes in, totally stoned, and she's totally out of it, and he's just looking at her in silence. And they suddenly cut to the, well, there isn't even, well, they cut, yeah, they're on Dustin's face. They cut to Kitty, and they cut back to a close-up of Dustin, and you actually, at first, you can't tell that he's wearing a different shirt. And the sound goes out, and you hear the waiter say, "Mr. Bruce," and then he gets up and he goes to pay, and now he's alone. No one's there, and he says, the waiter, "How's your wife?" And he says, we divorced. And then the waiter says, "You're better off." Just like, timing was just beautiful. So in that one cut, by having them all together, and then hearing the waiter's voice, and then seeing that no one's there, and of course by Lenny saying, "We're divorced," we know, like, that the time has moved forward a few years or so. We don't know exactly the length of time, and so we don't see the breakup, we don't see the divorce. He just, boom, in this one cut, the story moves forward, as Alan put it. And she goes to jail. She calls him from prison. I mean, it's sad. I mean, they did love each other. Is this love between them? But her drug addiction ultimately is what broke them up. And then when she's in jail, his career is rising, and he's getting more and more popular for speaking his mind, and he's saying all kinds of things about the hypocrisy of society and sex, and he gets arrested for it. And one of the great scenes was, because he had said cocksucker, and then at the comedy act, everyone's showing up. Is he going to say it again or not? Now he's been arrested. There's all these cops there, and he never says it. He goes, "I was arrested last night for saying," "No, I won't say it." And then he went to the crowd, and he asked various people, "Have you ever had your blah blah'd?" to a guy. And at the end, he says, "This is the sickest show I've ever done." And he never says anything, but then they arrest them anyways because of the implications. I mean, everyone knew what he was saying. He just found a way to rephrase it and code it, which was brilliant. But the heart of it is really this rise and fall of Lenny, I find, and the relationship with Kitty, and that they just loved each other, but their mutual addiction is ultimately what pulled them apart. And we see later on, when she gets out of jail, that he is then getting high with her. I mean, he also was doing drugs. He just didn't get addicted to the extent she did. I don't know if he was addicted, but he starts to do a lot of drugs as they get back. Well, you don't know if they officially get back together. And then, that scene, that long 6-minute scene, that great master shot that Alan described, where he's stoned and high, and he starts to scream and all these kind of things, and then he gets arrested, right? So little by little, they just begin to take things away from him. And as we saw in the film, he was so angry that his stand-up became just screaming and reading from the newspapers all these things that were happening to him. I mean, obviously the stress must have been enormous, and how he was trying to fight back. And he initially won early on, but then in the first time he went to trial, which we saw, and then he they got him later. They just arrested him again. And, finally that great monologue, and Dustin did it so beautifully at the end when he says, there he is with the judge. He's all alone. He dismissed his lawyers because he felt that they weren't representing him right. As he says to them in the washroom, I had to borrow $10 just to get here. He's totally broke. And he says, let me just do my act. And if you think it's obscene, fine. But he wants to do it. And they say no, and they drag him out. And just it breaks your heart when you hear him say, don't take away my words. I'm not hurting anybody. And that's it. I mean, it just goes, you see him say goodbye to his daughter. He's a bit bigger, and boom, as the briefcase closes in the courtroom, they kill, like, he's right at the end, and there he is dead on the floor. And there's something so dark about, all these various interviews, this, like, utilizing this docudrama format that Bob Fosse has in the film. Is, they interview his mother, they interview his manager, and in the end, you just see all the various tape recordings being turned off as the interviews are being conducted. And that's Bob Fosse's voice, which we mentioned. Bob Fosse is the one interviewing everybody. And, his manager's like, oh, it's been a real pleasure. Thank you for coming. And and I really love the guy. But that's it. It's, the tape recorders go off one by one, and everyone looks sad by the end of it. And it's closing that chapter. And there's something about just the fact that the film ends with this feeling of, story's over, folks, time to move on. Lenny's gone. There's something so tragic about that. There's an extra layer of tragedy about that. It just feels like, no, you don't want this man to die. He didn't deserve to die. He didn't deserve to be ruined. And you want the story to keep going in a sense. But then as all the tape recorders are turning off, that's it. It's over, that, and everyone says their goodbyes, and it ends on that photo of him. It's tragic. It's really a really tragic film, but it's powerfully done. The black and white cinematography is just absolutely gorgeous. I loved it. I mean, I'm really glad that they didn't shoot it in color. And the cinematography was by Bruce Surtees. Beautifully done. It's such a phenomenal looking film. Touching back on the performances, just the energy that Hoffman brought to it. I mean, he had this, as Kitty says, he was this nutty guy. And he really was. He just brought this real energy and nuttiness to it, and this ego at the same time, and charm, and of course the edge may have came from the editing, but like we said with Alan, but the edge of this man is certainly there. And of course the breakdown, the slow breakdown of this man, little by little, coming apart, and then by the end he dies. So it's a film I've seen many times. I'm sure I'll see it many more. If you haven't seen it, I highly recommend it. I just want to thank all of my members on Patreon. If you're interested in becoming a member of my Patreon, head over to patreon.com/Robert Bellissimo at the movies for full details. It's a great way to support YouTubers and podcasters and anyone who is a content creator in some way, shape, or form. So go to the link for full details. So thank you so much, everyone, for watching this review. I hope that you've enjoyed it. If this is your first time here, please consider subscribing to my YouTube channel by pressing the Robert Bellissimo at the Movies logo. You will see it floating above my head in the top left corner to your top left in just a second. Just click on that and then click the bell in order to get a notification every time I release one of my new episodes or when I go live. Thank you so much, everyone. I will see you in the next episode.